Tonight, Dumbledore gave me an impossible gift. A door to my parents.
Hello dear listeners, and welcome back to the Sleep Wizard's Library. Tonight, we open the doors to a story unlike any other. A story of memories, lost Christmas nights, and the versions of ourselves that live only in dreams. Harry Potter is 25 years old this Christmas Eve, and for the first time in years, he's truly, painfully alone. But what he's about to discover will change everything. A forgotten pensive memory left by Dumbledore himself. A window into a world where his parents survived, and where Christmas meant warmth, laughter, and the childhood he never had. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Let the snow fall quietly outside your window. Let the soft glow of Christmas lights guide your breath. And if you enjoy this story, please support the Sleep Wizard's Library with a like, a subscription, and a comment telling us where in the world you're listening from tonight. Now, let the lamplights dim. Let the night grow still. And join me as we begin. The Christmas they never had. Snow fell on London like a secret being whispered across the city. Each flake catching the amber glow of street lights before vanishing into the darkness below. It was Christmas Eve 11:47 at night. To be precise, and Harry Potter stood at the window of his Islington flat, watching the world celebrate without him. Below, the magical district of Diagon Alley glowed with festive enchantment. Witches caroled in midair, their voices harmonizing in perfect magical thirds. Storefronts blazed with golden light, their windows dressed in garlands that sparkled with real starlight. Enchanted bells rang out across the rooftops, calling the faithful to midnight services at the Wizarding Chapel. Children pressed their noses against shop windows, pointing at the moving displays of toy broomsticks and self-wrapping presents. Harry watched it all from behind glass, separated by more than just the physical barrier of the window. He was 25 years old, a decorated aura with commendations hanging in the ministry offices, a survivor of things that should have destroyed him. And he was utterly, completely, profoundly alone. Not the casual loneliness of being single or far from friends, though both were true. This was something deeper, something that had taken up residence in his bones so long ago he couldn't remember a time without it. It was the loneliness of being the person everyone knew but nobody truly saw. The loneliness of having saved the world and finding that salvation wasn't enough to fill the hollow places inside him. His flat reflected this emptiness. No tree stood in the corner. No decorations hung from the walls. No stockings waited by a fireplace he never bothered to light. He'd learned years ago that decorating for a Christmas when you were alone felt worse than not decorating at all. At least bare walls were honest about what they contained. Nothing. The invitations had come, as they always did. Ron and Hermione had asked him to their family gathering with that particular careful gentleness people use when they thought you might break. Ginny had sent an owl, her message brief but warm, hoping he'd reconsider. Even Luna had written, suggesting he spend Christmas investigating Dirigible Plum's response to seasonal magic at her father's house, which was so perfectly Luna that Harry had almost smiled. He'd declined them all with practiced excuses. Too much work at the ministry, needed the quiet to finish case reports. Would try to stop by on Boxing Day. The lies came easily now. Smooth and believable. Honed over years of avoiding the truth. That watching Ron with his mother. Seeing Hermione wrapped in domestic contentment. Being near Ginny and feeling the weight of what he couldn't give her, all of it felt like pressing on an open wound dot. So instead, he stood alone in the flat that had never quite become a home, watching snow fall on Christmas Eve, nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago, and tried very hard not to think about mothers and fathers and the shapes families were supposed to take. The Aura life had its compensations. He was good at it, better than good. Dark wizards seemed to understand, at some primal level, that Harry Potter carried a particular species of darkness in his own heart, and it made him relentless, dangerous, efficient. The ministry had offered him a promotion just last month, head of the Aura office by 30 if he wanted it. The career of legends, they'd said, a position men twice his age coveted. But careers didn't sit with you on Christmas Eve when the darkness outside matched the darkness inside, and you suddenly couldn't remember the last time you'd laughed at something genuinely funny. Careers didn't answer the question that had been gnawing at him for years. What was the point of surviving if you never learned to live? He set down his tea, and touched and forgotten, and moved away from the window. The clock on the mantel showed 11:52 p.m. 8 minutes until Christmas Day officially began. 8 minutes until he'd successfully avoided another holiday. That's when everything changed. The sound came first, not dramatic or theatrical, but soft and certain, like someone settling into a chair beside you after a long absence. Harry's hand moved instinctively toward his wand, though he didn't draw it. Years as an Aura had trained him to catalog threats instantly. The wards on his flat were intact. Nothing had been disturbed. Yet something fundamentally different inhabited the space now. On the table before him, where his cold tea had sat moments before, a box rested, not materializing in the violent way of most apparition magic. This was gentler, as though it had simply waited for him to notice it had always been there. The box was made of dark mahogany, elegant and simple, about the size of his hand. Silver letters had been carved into the lid in a script he would have recognized anywhere. For Harry, when the cold becomes unbearable, his breath caught. His heart, which had been beating slowly in the rhythm of resignation, suddenly accelerated. Only one person had ever given him gifts wrapped in riddles and timing. Only one person had loved him enough to plan something that would find him. Years beyond death itself, Albus Dumbledore. Harry hadn't allowed himself to think about his old headmaster much in recent years. It hurt too much. Carried too many complicated feelings of love and betrayal and forgiveness that he'd never quite sorted through. But the sight of that box, of those particular words in Dumbledore's precise, elegant handwriting, struck something deep and forgotten inside him. He reached for it slowly, reverently, the way one might approach a holy relic. The wood was warm under his fingers, impossibly warm for something that should have been cold. He lifted the lid. Inside, cushioned on velvet the color of burgundy wine, lay a pensieve, but not a standard one. Those were translucent and utilitarian, designed for function rather than beauty. This was exquisite, crafted from silver and something that looked like crystallized moonlight. Starlight seemed to live within its basin, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Beside the pensieve lay a letter, sealed with wax the same deep red as the velvet cushion. Harry's hands trembled as he broke the seal and unfolded the parchment. Dumbledore's handwriting covered the page unmistakable, beloved, and like a punch directly to his chest. My dearest Harry, if you are reading this, then Christmas has found you in that particular species of loneliness that requires no explanation, needs no justification, only acknowledgement. I left this gift to find you when the ache became most acute, and my dear boy, I knew it would. Your burden has always been heavier than any person should have to bear. Within this pensive, I have left you something extraordinary. Not a memory of my own, but a memory that exists in a place beyond our world. It shows you a Christmas Eve from another London, another universe entirely. It shows you, James, and Lily alive, happy, whole, celebrating Christmas with their son in a reality where Voldemort never came. Where there was no prophecy, no chosen one, no burden of destiny. You will see yourself, Harry, not as you are, but as you might have been. I ask you to witness this vision fully and completely. Do not shy away from it, no matter how much it hurts. This vision is not torture, it is a gift, though like all meaningful gifts, it comes with a cost I will explain in the second letter. When you have finished watching, read the enclosed white envelope marked after. Only then will you understand the true nature of what I am offering you, and the choice that lies before you. Know that whatever you decide, I am proud of you beyond words. You have always been braver than you believed, stronger than you seemed, and more loved than you knew, with profound affection and hope. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. The memory will show you 3 hours. Do not rush it. Let yourself feel everything. Harry read the letter 3 times, each word sinking deeper into his consciousness. His hands had stopped shaking now. In their place came a profound, aching curiosity mixed with something that felt almost like fear. He looked at the clock. 11:57 p.m. 3 minutes until Christmas Day. He picked up the pensieve carefully, reverently. It was warm to the touch despite the coldness of the room, as though it contained something living. The silver surface rippled gently, invitingly, showing him fractured glimpses of firelight and warmth and faces he'd only ever known from photographs. Harry took a deep breath, steadying himself with the practiced calm of an aura entering a dangerous situation. Then he leaned forward and pressed his face into the silver basin. The world dissolved round him. The sensation of falling through a pensieve never became ordinary, no matter how many times Harry experienced it. For a moment, there was the peculiar dislocation of being everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. And then he was standing in a sitting room he'd never seen before, yet somehow recognized in his very soul. It was Christmas Eve, but wrong in the most beautiful way imaginable. The room was warm genuinely, impossibly warm, with firelight dancing across walls painted the color of cream and honey. Christmas decorations weren't just hung, but lived with, integrated into the space the way beloved things become part of a home's very fabric. Garland draped over the mantel wasn't perfectly symmetrical. It sagged slightly on one side where someone had clearly adjusted it by hand. Ornaments on the tree weren't color-coordinated but chaotic, telling stories of years accumulated, memories collected, a childhood that grew rather than exploded into being. The smell hit him. Next, cinnamon and pine and something warm and vanilla sweet. That made his chest physically ache with recognition of something he'd never actually experienced, but had always, somehow, been searching for. And there, on the floor near the fireplace, was a boy. He looked to be about 6 years old, lying on his stomach with his tongue poking out slightly in concentration as he drew something on a large piece of parchment with colored pencils. He had dark, impossibly messy hair that stuck up at the back, and when he shifted to reach for a different color, Harry caught a glimpse of his eyes, bright green, precisely the shade Harry saw in the mirror every morning. The boy was drawing a broomstick, a child's careful rendering of a flying broom, complete with motion lines to show it was going fast. "Mom," the boy called out without looking up from his drawing, his voice bright with the unself-conscious confidence of a child who had never doubted he would be heard. "Is it too early to start learning to fly? You said maybe this summer. But what if I practiced on the broom in the garden? Even just a small one. Just having, please." A woman appeared in the doorway, and Harry's entire world stopped. He knew this woman only from photographs, from the single memory Snape had given him, from stories others had told with sad, distant eyes, but seeing her actually move, actually live, actually exist as a person rather than a ghost of a photograph, it was different. It was everything. Lily Potter was real in a way that made Harry feel like his heart might split open and spill out across the floor. She had red hair that caught the firelight, worn long and slightly wavy, tied back with a ribbon that was coming loose. She wore comfortable clothes, a green jumper and jeans, and she moved with the easy grace of someone in her own home. Someone safe, someone loved, and her eyes green. Exactly like his, exactly like the boy's, held such uncomplicated joy that Harry had to look away for a moment because it hurt too much to witness. "You're not even 7 yet. You impatient thing," she said, kneeling beside the boy and ruffling his already messy hair with obvious affection. "But I suppose we might begin with the very basics come spring. Your father's been dying to teach you. He checks the Quidditch shop every week to see if they've got child-sized brooms in stock yet." "Where is Dad?" the young Harry asked, looking up at his mother with absolute trust. "In the kitchen, attempting to make his special Christmas biscuits," Lily said, her smile turning playfully wicked. "Which means they'll be absolutely dreadful, and we'll eat them anyway and tell him they're wonderful. Because we love him, and he tried so hard," a man's voice called from the other room, rich with laughter. "I heard that, and I want you both to know my biscuits are improving dramatically. This year I've only set the kitchen on fire once, and I put it out very quickly." Lily laughed, a genuine and self-conscious laugh that seemed to fill the entire room with light. She bent and kissed the boy's dark head, holding him close for just a moment longer than necessary. "Come along, love. Dinner's almost ready, and afterward we need to finish wrapping the last presents before hot chocolate and Christmas stories by the fire. Tomorrow's the big day." The young Harry looked up at his mother with eyes that had never known fear, never known loss, never doubted for a single second that he was wanted and safe and loved beyond measure. He took her hand and stood, leaving his drawing on the floor. As they moved toward the kitchen, Harry, the adult Harry, the one trapped inside this memory like a ghost haunting his own unlived life, followed them through walls that separated worlds. The kitchen was warm chaos incarnate. James Potter stood at the counter, very much alive, dark-haired and handsome, and wearing an apron that said "World's Best Dad" in letters that kept rearranging themselves. There was indeed a small blackened spot on the wall where a kitchen fire had recently been extinguished, and flour dusted across his glasses. He looked up as his wife and son entered, and his entire face transformed with such uncomplicated joy that it physically hurt Harry to witness. This was his father, not the young man frozen in photographs, not the echo in a mirror, not the story other people told, but his actual father, living and breathing and wearing a ridiculous apron. "They are my two favorite people in the entire world," James said, opening his arms to catch the boy as he ran to him. "And my third favorite people, the biscuits, are right here on this schooling rack, where they are definitely not burnt. Much. Hardly at all." "Really?" Lily moved into his embrace too, and they stood there, the three of them, parents and child, a complete family unit, laughing together in warm kitchen light while snow fell softly outside the windows. The boy giggled and pointed at the blackened spot. "You did set it on fire again, didn't you?" "Only a little bit," James said with mock dignity. "Your mother is exaggerating wildly. I'm actually becoming quite good at this baking business." "You're becoming quite good at putting out fires quickly," Lily corrected. But her voice was filled with affection. They ate dinner together at a table that was slightly too small, their knees bumping, passing dishes and laughing at James's terrible jokes. Harry stood in the corner like a ghost, watching his parents be alive, watching himself be happy, watching the life that had been stolen from all of them. After dinner, they moved to the sitting room. The boy sat on the floor near the fire while James read him a Christmas story, something about a wizard who learned that the best magic was kindness. Lily sat on the couch, her fingers absently playing with James's hair as he read in different voices for different characters, making their son laugh until he had to hold his stomach. When the story finished and the boy's eyes began to droop with sleepiness, James carried him upstairs. Harry followed, unable to stop himself, needing to see every moment of this impossible gift. The boy's bedroom was everything a child's room should be. Comfortable, loved, filled with toys and books and moving Quidditch posters on the walls. James tucked his son into bed decorated with snitches and bludgers on the sheets. "Dad," the boy asked as James pulled the covers up, "do you think tomorrow will be a good Christmas?" "I think tomorrow will be the best Christmas yet," James said, kissing his son's forehead, "because I get to spend it with you and your mom. And that makes every day the best day. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. More than all the stars in the sky." Lily came in then, sitting on the other side of the bed. She sang softly a lullaby Harry had never heard but somehow felt he'd always known. Her voice was beautiful, warm, filled with a mother's love that Harry had never experienced but had spent his entire life longing for. The boy fell asleep between his parents, their hands clasped over his small body, protecting him even in sleep. James and Lily sat there for a long moment, watching their son breathe in the peaceful rhythm of a child who had never known nightmares. "He's so happy," Lily whispered. "He's so loved," James replied. "And he always will be. Nothing will ever hurt him, Lily. I promise you that. I know," she said, and there were tears in her eyes, happy tears. The kind that came from overwhelming gratitude for a life that was exactly what you'd hoped it would be. They stood together, holding each other, and walked to the door. James turned off the light, leaving just a small nightlight glowing in the shape of a golden snitch. "Merry Christmas, son," James whispered into the darkness. "Sweet dreams, my love." Lily added dot, and then they were gone. And Harry was left standing in a darkened room, watching a child sleep peacefully, a child who was him, and who was everything he'd never been allowed to become. The memory didn't end there. It continued through the night and into Christmas morning. Harry watched as the boy woke at dawn, eyes bright with excitement, racing downstairs to find presents under the tree. He watched as James and Lily came down together, laughing at their son's enthusiasm, helping him open gifts that had been chosen with love and care. He watched as they spent the day together playing with new toys, having a snowball fight in the garden, eating a Christmas dinner that Lily cooked while James set off minor fires and made everyone laugh. He watched as evening came and the family settled by the fire again, the boy dozing between his parents, completely safe, completely loved, completely and utterly happy. And through it all, Harry stood as a witness to the life that should have been his. When the memory finally began to fade, when the edges started to blur like a watercolor painting left in vain, Harry found himself back in his cold flat, on his knees without remembering how he'd gotten there. Tears streamed down his face, silent, unstoppable, coming from somewhere beyond words or reason. He had just witnessed the life that had been stolen from him. Not a fantasy or a dream or a story someone had invented to make him feel better. That was real. That was lived, somewhere, in another fold of reality. Those were his parents, alive and in love and devoted to raising him in happiness and safety. That was the boy he might have been. The clock showed 3:47 a.m. He'd been in the memory for nearly 4 hours, though it had felt both like minutes and like eternity. And there, on the table beside the pensieve, waited the white envelope marked after. Harry knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever that envelope contained would change everything. With trembling hands, he reached for it. Harry sat on the floor of his flat, The white envelope opened in his hands. For what felt like hours, the tears had finally stopped, leaving him hollow and exhausted, as though he'd cried out something essential and couldn't quite remember how to feel human without it. Outside, London remained dark and quiet. Christmas morning had arrived, but dawn was still hours away. The world slept while Harry held an envelope that he knew, with the intuition that had kept him alive through wars and darkness, would fundamentally alter the course of his life. Finally, he broke the seal. The letter inside was longer than the first, written on parchment that shimmered slightly in the dim light. My dearest Harry, if you have reached this letter, then you have witnessed what I hoped you would see. The life that was meant to be yours. The life where your parents lived. Where you were loved and safe and allowed to simply be a child. I cannot imagine the weight of what you've just experienced. The grief of seeing what was stolen from you so clearly displayed. But I must tell you something that will make that grief even more complicated. What you have seen is not merely a vision or a dream. It is real. In a parallel universe that exists alongside our own. Your parents are alive. That boy, that happy, loved version of you exists in that world at this very moment. He is real. Harry, as real as you are. I have spent the final decades of my life studying the nature of parallel universes, the doors between worlds that quantum magic occasionally opens. It was work done in secret, work I could share with no one, for the implications were too vast and too dangerous. But in my final months, I succeeded in creating something unprecedented, a portal between two specific universes, ours and the one where your parents survived. This portal can only be opened by you, Harry Potter. It responds to your magical signature alone, to the unique combination of your mother's sacrifice and your father's blood and your own extraordinary power. No one else can use it. No one else can even see it. And so I must offer you a choice, perhaps the cruelest and most generous gift I could give. At dawn on Christmas morning, when the church bells across London begin to toll, the portal will open in your flat. It will remain open for precisely 1 hour. During that time, you can step through it into the parallel universe. You can walk into that warm home you witnessed, where your parents are alive and waiting. Where you have a family, where you have the life that was stolen from you. The magic I have created will ensure a seamless transition. The other Harry, the boy you saw, will have no memory of you crossing over. He will simply cease to exist as reality reshapes itself around your arrival. You will have always been their son in that world. You will have all the memories of a happy childhood, while retaining your knowledge of this world as well. You will be whole. Harry. Loved, safe. You will have the life you deserve. But there is an alternative. You can choose to bring the other Harry here instead. If you step through the portal and then return, pulling him with you, he will arrive in this universe. He will be confused and traumatized. Yes, pulled from his safe world into this harder one. But he will be you. A version of you who has never known war loss or the crushing weight of prophecy. He will be innocent. If you choose this path, you will remain in this world. You will continue to bear your burdens, your loneliness, your knowledge of suffering. But that innocent boy will have a chance to grow into the man you might have been if circumstances had been different. The choice cannot be undone. Harry, the portal will open only once. Whichever decision you make, it is permanent. You cannot return once you've crossed. You cannot change your mind. I will not presume to guess what you should do. Both choices carry profound weight. Taking the life you deserved is not selfish, it is justice for what was stolen from you. But I know your heart, my boy. I know that you have spent your life protecting others, sacrificing your own happiness for the greater good. I suspect you will struggle with the idea of letting that innocent child be destroyed, for that is what bringing him here would mean. His innocence would be shattered. Whatever you choose, know that I am proud of you. Know that you are loved. Know that this gift, painful as it is, comes from a place of deepest affection, and hope that you might finally find peace, whether here or in another world entirely. The bells will ring at 7 o'clock. You have until 8 to make your decision and act upon it. I suggest you spend these remaining hours in careful thought. With all the love I possess, Albus Dumbledore. Your only final note: if you choose to stay in this world, I have arranged for certain supports to find you. You will not be as alone as you have been. Trust that I have seen to this, even from beyond death. But ultimately, the choice of how to live and where to live must be yours alone. Harry let the letter fall from his hands. He sat in the darkness of his flat, in the cold early hours of Christmas morning, and tried to process the impossible weight of what Dumbledore had given him. He could leave. He could step through a portal into another life, another world, where his parents were alive and waiting. He could have the childhood he'd been denied, the love he'd never known, the safety he'd never experienced. He could be whole, or he could stay. He could let that innocent boy remain in his perfect world, protected from the darkness Harry had spent his life fighting. He could continue to bear his burdens alone, knowing he'd prevented someone else, another version of himself, from having to suffer. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily toward dawn. Harry rose on unsteady legs and moved to the window. The snow had stopped falling. The city lay quiet and dark, waiting for a Christmas morning to truly begin. Below, the few early risers were already moving through the streets, shopkeepers preparing to open, families eager to start their celebrations. Harry pressed his forehead against the cold glass and tried to imagine it, walking through a portal into warmth and love and safety. Having a mother who would sing him lullabies. Having a father who would teach him to fly and make terrible biscuits and love him without question. Having a life that wasn't defined by loss and sacrifice and the crushing weight of being the boy who lived. It would be so easy, so beautifully, perfectly easy. But there was always a but. That boy, that innocent, happy child sleeping peacefully in another world would cease to exist if Harry crossed over. His consciousness would be absorbed, his innocent happiness erased, replaced by Harry's darker knowledge and painful memories. And if Harry brought him here instead, that boy would wake on Christmas morning to find himself ripped from his safe world and thrust into a reality that had no place for innocence. Harry had spent his entire life protecting others. It was his defining characteristic, the core of who he was, even when it cost him everything, even when it meant his own suffering. He could not let innocent people be harmed if he had the power to prevent it. And that boy was innocent. That boy deserved his happiness, deserved to grow up loved and safe and whole in a way Harry had never been allowed. Could Harry really destroy that to save himself? The question hung in the air as dawn began to break over London, painting the sky in shades of grey and gold. Harry had 2 hours to decide. At 6:30 a.m. As the city began to wake and Christmas morning truly arrived, Harry made his decision. He couldn't do it. He couldn't let that innocent boy's happiness be destroyed, not for him, not for anyone. The boy deserved the life he had, the parents who loved him, the safety Harry had never known. To take that away, either by replacing him or by dragging him into this darker world, would be an act of profound cruelty. And Harry Potter had spent his entire life refusing to be cruel, even when cruelty might have been easier. He thought about the boy sleeping peacefully in that other world, safe between parents who adored him. He thought about the life the child would have, full of love and laughter and ordinary problems like learning to fly and making friends and figuring out who he wanted to be. A life unmarked by prophecy or destiny or war. That life had value. That happiness mattered. And Harry, who had learned through terrible experience what it meant to sacrifice for others, understood that sometimes the greatest gift you could give was to let someone else have what you desperately wanted. At 6:55 a.m. Harry sat in his armchair, the empty pensieve on the table before him, and waited for the portal to open. He didn't have to use it. He didn't have to step through or pull anyone back. He could simply let it close, let that other world continue on. Let that boy grow up in happiness and safety. The church bells began to toll across London. 7 o'clock, Christmas morning dot, and in the center of Harry's flat, reality began to shimmer and twist. The portal opened like a tear in the fabric of existence, revealing a glimpse of that other world. Warm firelight, the edge of a Christmas tree, the faint sound of laughter from another room. Through that opening, Harry could smell pine and cinnamon. He could feel the warmth emanating from the other side. All he had to do was step through. But he didn't move. He sat in his chair, tears streaming silently down his face, and watched the portal remain open. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. The portal would close at 8 o'clock. Harry had 53 minutes to change his mind, to take what was being offered, to save himself. He didn't take a single step toward it. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in years. He allowed himself to fully grieve, not just for his parents, not just for the life stolen from him, but for the choice he was making right now. The choice to stay in this world, to remain broken and lonely and scarred, because doing otherwise would harm someone innocent. He grieved for what he would never have, for the mother who would never sing him lullabies, for the father who would never teach him to fly, for the childhood that would remain forever out of reach. And as he grieved, something strange happened. The weight he'd been carrying, the crushing, suffocating weight of his loneliness and loss, began to shift. Not disappear, not even lessen, but transform into something else entirely. Into purpose, into meaning, into the profound understanding that his suffering had shaped him into someone capable of this exact moment, the moment of choosing someone else's happiness over his own. The portal shimmered in front of him, invitation and temptation, and the promise of everything he'd ever wanted. Harry closed his eyes and whispered two words into the silence. "I stay." At exactly 8 o'clock, the church bells tolled again, marking the hour, and the portal closed. The shimmer in reality sealed itself. The tear mended. The doorway between worlds vanished, as though it had never existed. The warmth faded. The smell of pine and cinnamon disappeared. The sound of distant laughter cut off abruptly. Harry sat alone in his cold flat on Christmas morning, and for the first time in his life, felt something that wasn't quite peace, but was close enough. Acceptance. He had chosen, not because someone forced him, not because prophecy demanded it, but because he had looked at an impossible choice and decided that protecting innocence mattered more than his own happiness. And somehow, in that choice, he had found something he'd been searching for without knowing it. The knowledge that his life, difficult and lonely as it was, had meaning beyond survival. At 8:15 a.m., exhausted beyond measure, Harry finally stood from his chair. His body ached as though he'd been in physical battle. His eyes burned from tears. His chest felt simultaneously hollow and unbearably full. But he was still here, still in this world, still himself. He moved to the kitchen to make tea, something ordinary, something grounding, and that's when he noticed the third letter. It sat on his kitchen table, sealed with the same purple wax as the others. But this one was marked differently. After the choice, Harry picked it up with trembling hands and broke the seal. "My dearest Harry, if you are reading this, then you have made your choice. And if I know you as well as I believe I do, and if you're reading this particular letter rather than living in another world entirely, then you have chosen to stay. You have chosen to let that innocent boy remain in his happiness. You have chosen to bear your burdens rather than pass them to someone else. You have chosen, as you have always chosen, to protect others even when it costs you everything. I am not surprised. I am profoundly sad for you, but I am not surprised. And so I must tell you what I could not tell you before. Your choice was the right one. Harry, not because the other choice would have been wrong, there was no wrong answer to this impossible question, but because you made it for the right reasons. You chose out of love rather than fear, out of compassion rather than desperation. That is who you are. That is who you have always been. But I will not let you suffer this choice alone. Look in your sitting room, on the shelf beside where the portal opened. There, you will find a small wooden box. Inside is a modified pensive one that does not show memories, but rather creates them. You can visit that other world. Harry, not physically, not permanently, but in moments of deepest need. You can see your parents, talk to them in that dream space between worlds. It will not be the same as truly having them, but it will be something. A comfort, a connection. Don't use it sparingly, my boy. Do not let it become a prison of longing, but know that when the loneliness becomes unbearable, when you need to feel your mother's love or hear your father's voice, you have this gift. And one more thing. I have arranged for certain people to reach out to you today. Ron and Hermione have been given a letter explaining, in the vaguest terms, that you need them more than ever. They will arrive at your flat within the hour. Do not turn them away. Let yourself be loved by the family you have chosen, even if they are not the family you were meant to have. You are not as alone as you feel. Harry, you have never been as alone as you feel. And perhaps, in time, you will learn that the family we choose can be just as real and just as powerful as the family we are born into. You have always been extraordinary, my dear boy, not because of prophecy or destiny or power, but because of your capacity to love, even when love has brought you nothing but pain. That is magic more profound than anything I ever taught you. Live. Harry, not just survive, live. Find joy where you can. Let people in. And know that your parents, wherever they are in whatever world they inhabit, are immeasurably proud of the man you have become, with eternal love and respect. Albus Dumbledore, the biscuits James makes in that other world really are terrible. But Lily and young Harry eat them anyway, because love means accepting someone's terrible biscuits with gratitude. Perhaps you might remember this when your friends offer you their own imperfect gifts. Harry folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. Then he walked to his sitting room and found the small wooden box exactly where Dumbledore had said it would be. Inside was a pensieve unlike any he'd ever seen, smaller, more intimate, glowing with a soft silver light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Beside it was a simple instruction card. Think of them, and they will come. Harry closed the box and placed it on his shelf. Not hidden, but not prominently displayed either. A resource for the darkest nights, but not a crutch to lean on every day. He made his tea and was halfway through his first sip when the knocking came at his door. Part 7. The family we choose. Harry opened the door to find Ron and Hermione standing in the hallway, both still in their pajamas with heavy cloaks thrown over them, their faces etched with concern and determination. "Don't even think about turning us away," Hermione said before Harry could speak. "We got a letter from Dumbledore, don't ask us how. We don't understand it either, and it said you needed us. And that's all we need to know. We brought breakfast," Ron added, holding up a basket that smelled of fresh pastries and Mrs. Weasley's cooking. Mum insisted, "And before you say you're fine, mate, we both know that's rubbish. So we're coming in, and you're going to tell us what's going on. And we're going to sit with you because that's what family does on Christmas morning." Harry wanted to protest. He wanted to send them away, to protect them from his darkness, to handle this alone as he'd handled everything alone for so long. But standing in his doorway, looking at his two best friends who had gotten out of their warm beds and left their own celebrations to come to him based on nothing but a mysterious letter and their love for him. Harry found he couldn't refuse. "I watched my parents," he said quietly, the words coming before he could stop them. "Dumbledore left me a way to see them alive. In another universe. I watched them on Christmas Eve with a version of me who got to grow up with them, who got to be happy and normal and loved." Hermione's hand flew to her mouth. Ron's face went pale, and then Harry continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I was given a choice to go to that world, to have that life, or to bring that other me here, and I chose neither. I chose to let him stay happy and to stay here myself, because I couldn't destroy someone else's innocence to save my own happiness." There was a long moment of silence. Then Ron stepped forward and pulled Harry into a fierce hug. "You absolute idiot," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You brilliant, self-sacrificing, impossibly good idiot." Hermione joined the embrace, and for a moment, the three of them stood in the doorway of Harry's flat, holding each other the way they had after battles and losses and moments when the world had tried to break them. When they finally pulled apart, Hermione's eyes were red with tears. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's have some breakfast, and you can tell us everything. And then we're spending Christmas Day together, whether you like it or not." They spent the morning in Harry's flat, which slowly transformed from a cold, empty space into something warmer. Ron set up the food on the table while Hermione conjured decorations nothing elaborate. Just simple garland and a few floating candles that cast soft, golden light round the room. Harry told them everything about the pensieve, about watching his parents alive and happy, about the portal and Dumbledore's letters and the impossible choice he'd been given. He told them about the boy who was him but wasn't, about the life that should have been his, about standing in that other house and watching his father read bedtime stories and his mother sing lullabies. They listened without interruption, and when he finished, neither of them tried to tell him he'd made the wrong choice or the right choice. They simply sat with him in his grief and his acceptance. "I think," Hermione said eventually, "that what you did was the most Harry Potter thing imaginable. You saw someone innocent and happy, and you protected that innocence even though it cost you everything you've ever wanted." "Dumbledore was right about one thing," Ron added. "You're not alone, mate. You've got us. You've got the whole Weasley clan who consider you family. You've got Ginny, and Luna, and Neville, and dozens of other people who love you. It's not the same as having your parents, and I'd never pretend it is. But it's not nothing. It's not nothing." Harry agreed softly. They spent the rest of Christmas Day together. They played wizard chess, with Ron winning spectacularly and Harry not minding at all. They ate too much food. They told stories about Hogwarts and laughed at memories that were equal parts joy and pain. Hermione read aloud from a book about magical theory while Ron dozed on the couch. Harry made tea for all of them, and nobody commented on the fact that he seemed more settled, more present, than he had in months as evening approached. Ginny arrived with Luna and Neville. They'd all received mysterious letters suggesting they might want to check on Harry. None of them questioned it. They simply showed up, bringing more food and laughter and the particular brand of chaotic warmth that came from gathering people who had survived darkness together. Harry's flat, which had been so empty and cold that morning, filled with life, with conversation and laughter and the sounds of people who cared about each other simply being together. At one point, Harry stood back and watched them all run arguing with Neville about proper herbology technique, Hermione showing Luna a new book, Ginny setting up a game of exploding snap and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Gratitude. Not for the life he'd been given, not for the choices he'd had to make, but for this moment right here, for these people who had chosen to love him despite everything, For the family he'd found rather than the family he'd lost. Part 8. The Peace of Dawnlit that night. After everyone had finally gone home with promises to return the next day, Harry stood once again at his window, looking out over London. The city was quiet now, the celebrations winding down, families settling into their homes with full bellies and warm hearts. Snow had begun to fall again, gentle and soft, covering everything in white. Harry's flat still bore the evidence of the day's gathering dishes in the sink, a half-finished game of chess on the table, Hermione's book left on the couch with a bookmark carefully placed. The decorations Hermione had conjured remained. Casting their gentle golden light dot, it wasn't the same as having his parents. It would never be the same dot, but it was something. It was real. It was his dot. Harry thought about the boy in that other universe, probably sleeping peacefully right now, unaware that he'd been protected by a man he would never meet. That boy would wake up tomorrow and have breakfast with his parents. He would continue to grow up loved and safe and whole. He would never know about prophecies or Horcruxes, or the weight of being the chosen one. He would never know that Harry had chosen his happiness over his own, and that was exactly as it should be. Harry moved to the shelf where he'd placed Dumbledore's final gift, the small pensieve. That would let him visit his parents in that dream space between worlds. He picked it up and held it in his hands, feeling its warmth, its promise of comfort. But he didn't use it. Not tonight. Tonight, he wanted to sit with the life he had chosen, with the friends who had surrounded him today, with the family he had found, with the knowledge that his choice had mattered, that protecting someone else's innocence had been worth the cost. He would use the pensieve someday, when the loneliness became too sharp to bear alone. He would see his parents again, talk to them in that space between realities, and draw comfort from their love even if it was filtered through magic and distance. But right now, he wanted to honor the choice he'd made by being fully present in this world, this life. This moment, Harry returned to his armchair and picked up the book Hermione had left behind. He read by the light of her conjured candles, occasionally looking up to watch the snowfall outside his window. And for the first time in years, he felt something that approached contentment. He was 25 years old. He was alone in his flat on Christmas night. He had lost his parents twice now, once to death, and once to a choice that had required more strength than any battle ever had. But he was here. He was present. He had chosen to stay in a world that was hard and complicated and sometimes unbearably painful, because staying meant protecting someone else's light. And in that choice, he had found something he'd been searching for his entire life. The knowledge that his existence had meaning beyond survival. Part 9. The morning after boxing. Day arrived with pale winter sunlight streaming through Harry's windows. He woke slowly, peacefully, without the usual jolt of anxiety that accompanied most of his mornings. The decorations Hermione had conjured still glowed softly in the corners. The dishes from yesterday's gathering still sat in the sink, evidence of life lived, of connections made, of a day spent with people who cared. Harry made tea and stood at his window, watching London wake up. The city looked different somehow, or perhaps he was looking at it differently. The same streets, the same buildings, the same distant view of Diagon Alley. But now they felt less like a prison and more like a landscape he belonged in. His hour arrived mid-morning with a flurry of letters. Mrs. Weasley, thanking him for letting Ron and Hermione spend Christmas Day with him and inviting him to the Burrow for New Year's. Ginny, asking if he wanted to grab coffee later in the week. Luna, with a rambling note about Nargles and friendship and how she was glad he seemed less cloudy than before. And one more letter. This one with no return address, sealed with purple wax. Harry's heart caught as he opened it. Dear Harry, this is the last letter I will be able to send you. The magic that has delivered these messages exhausts itself with this final correspondence. But I wanted to reach you one more time, the morning after your choice, to tell you what I could not say before. I am proud of you beyond measure. You stood at the doorway between worlds and chose compassion over comfort. You protected innocence when you could have claimed the happiness that was rightfully yours. You proved, once and for all, that prophecy did not define you, your choices did. The work ahead of you will not be easy. Living is often harder than surviving, but I believe you are finally ready to truly live. Harry, to let people love you, to find joy in small moments, to build a life that is not perfect but is genuinely yours. Remember, you are not defined by what was taken from you, but by what you choose to do with what remains. And what remains is extraordinary. Keep the pensive as a comfort, but do not let it become a prison. Visit your parents when you need them, but live your life in this world with the people who are here and real and ready to love you. And know that wherever I am, whatever exists beyond the veil, I am watching you with more pride and affection than any father could have for a son. Go forth, Harry Potter. Live boldly, love fiercely, and know that you have earned every moment of happiness that comes your way. With eternal love. Albashiri read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and placed it with the others in a drawer he designated specifically for Dumbledore's final gifts. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He sent return owls to everyone who had written. Yes to coffee with Ginny. Yes to New Year's at the Bro. A long thank you to Mrs. Weasley. A cheerful response to Luna's Noggle theories. He was making connections, accepting invitations, letting people in. Living. Part 10. The gift that keeps giving. Weeks passed. January arrived with cold winds and short days. But Harry found he minded the winter less than he had before. He used the small pensieve twice, once in a moment of overwhelming grief, and once simply because he wanted to hear his mother's voice. Each time, he visited that dream space between worlds where his parents waited. They weren't truly real. Dumbledore had been clear about that, but they were real enough. Real enough to embrace him. Real enough to tell him they were proud. Real enough to give him the comfort he needed to return to his life with renewed strength. And each time, he left the dream space by choice, returning to his flat and his friends and the life he had chosen. Work at the ministry continued. Harry still chased dark wizards and filled out paperwork and dealt with the bureaucratic nonsense that came with being a decorated aura. But he also started leaving work on time, started accepting invitations to dinner, started building a life that extended beyond his job. He had coffee with Ginny and found that they could talk without the weight of their complicated history crushing every conversation. They would never be together the way they once were, but they could be friends, real friends, and that was worth something. He spent weekends at the Bro, letting Mrs. Weasley fuss over him and playing chess with Ron and helping George in the shop. He became Uncle Harry to Ron and Hermione's children, present and engaged in a way he'd never allowed himself to be before. He had dinner with Luna once a month, listening to her wild theories and finding that her particular brand of wisdom helped him see the world from different angles. He started cooking badly at first, burning things with the same enthusiasm James had shown in that other world's kitchen. But he kept trying, gradually got better, and found satisfaction in creating something with his own hands. He adopted a cat, his scraggly orange thing with one torn ear and a suspicious disposition. He named it Padfoot, which made Remus laugh until he cried when Harry told him. The cat became his companion in the quiet evenings, a living presence that made his flat feel less empty. Small things. Ordinary things. The building blocks of a life. February brought Harry's birthday, and his friends threw him a party, not a big celebration. Just dinner at the Bro with cake and terrible jokes and the warm chaos of people who loved him. When they sang happy birthday, Harry looked round the table at these people who had chosen to be in his life, and felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost hurt. He was 26 years old. He had lost his parents twice. He carried scars that would never fully heal. But he was here, and he was living, and he was loved in the imperfect, complicated way that real love always manifested. That night, back in his flat with Padfoot purring on his lap, Harry took out the small pensieve one more time. He stepped into the dream space and found his parents waiting, as they always were. "Mom, Dad," he said, his voice steady. "I wanted to tell you that I'm okay, really okay, for the first time in my life. I think I'm actually okay." Lily smiled, her green eyes shining with joy. "We know, sweetheart. We can see it in you. You're living," James added, pride evident in every word. "Not just surviving, actually living. That's all we ever wanted for you. I choose to stay," Harry said, "in my world, with my life, even though it meant not being with you, even though it meant letting go of the life I could have had." "We know," Lily said softly, "and we are so proud of that choice. You protected someone innocent," James said. "You chose compassion over comfort. That's who you are, son. That's who you've always been. I'm building something here," Harry continued. "It's not perfect. It's not the life I dreamed of as a child, but it's mine, and it's real, and it matters. Then you've learned what we always hoped you would learn," Lily said, reaching out to touch his face with a hand that felt like warm sunlight. "That happiness doesn't have to be perfect to be real. That family doesn't have to be blood to be true. That surviving isn't the same as living. But both are necessary to become whole. I love you both," Harry said. "I always will, but I think I'm ready to live in the world I choose, without needing to visit quite so often." "That's exactly what we hoped you'd say," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "Live your life, Harry. We'll always be here when you need us. But go live your life." Harry embraced them both, holding tight to this echo of his parents, this gift Dumbledore had left him. Then he stepped back, smiled through his tears, and left the dream space. He returned to his flat, to his cat, to his imperfect but real life, and he felt, for the first time, genuinely at peace. Epilogue. Christmas. 1 year later, following Christmas Eve, found Harry standing in his flat again. But everything was different now. The flat was decorated not elaborately, but honestly. A small tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments friends had given him throughout the year. Garland hung over the doorway. Stockings that Molly had wear upon for him waited by a fireplace that now burned regularly, warming the space. Harry had spent the day at the Brew, helping prepare for tomorrow's gathering. He would return in the morning to spend Christmas Day with his chosen family, Ron and Hermione and their growing brood, the rest of the Weasleys, Luna and Neville and their partners, Teddy and Andromeda, all the people who had woven themselves into the fabric of his life. But tonight, Christmas Eve, he had claimed for himself, not out of loneliness this time, but out of choice, a quiet evening to reflect on the year that had passed, on the choice he had made, on the life he had built. He stood at his window, watching snow fall on London just as he had a year ago. But the man watching now was fundamentally different from the man who had stood here 12 months prior. That man had been hollow with loneliness, heavy with grief, questioning whether survival was worth the cost. This man was whole. Not undamaged, he would never be undamaged, but whole in a way that accepted his scars as part of who he was rather than proof of what he lacked. The small pensieve sat on his shelf. Dusty from months of disuse, he hadn't needed to visit his parents since that night in February. Knowing he could was enough, knowing they were proud of him, knowing they loved him, knowing He could access their comfort if he truly needed it. That knowledge sustained him without requiring constant confirmation. His owl arrived with evening letters, cards from friends round the world, an invitation from Jenny and her new boyfriend to join them for New Year's drinks, a package from Luna containing what appeared to be a hat made entirely of cork, a letter from McGonagall asking if he'd consider speaking to all her students at Hogwarts about the realities of the job, invitations, connections, evidence of a life fully lived. Harry made himself tea and settled into his armchair with a book. Padfoot jumped into his lap, purring contentedly. Outside, church bells began to ring across the city, calling people to midnight services. The clock showed 11:47 p.m., exactly the time when, 1 year ago, Dumbledore's gift had appeared and changed everything. Harry thought about that other Harry, in that other world, probably tucked safely in bed right now with parents who loved him. That boy would wake up tomorrow to presents and laughter and a Christmas spent surrounded by family who had never known war or loss or the crushing weight of prophecy. Harry hoped he was happy. He hoped he remained innocent and safe and whole. He hoped he grew up to be someone kind and good, unburdened by the darkness that had shaped this version of Harry into who he was. And Harry was glad, genuinely, profoundly glad, that he had chosen to protect that innocence. Because in protecting that other Harry's happiness, he had discovered his own. Not the happiness he dreamed of as a child, not the perfect family or the unblemished childhood, but something real and hard-won and genuinely his. He had learned what Dumbledore had hoped he would learn, that surviving and living were different things, and both were necessary. That family could be chosen as well as born. That happiness didn't have to be perfect to be real. The clock struck midnight, and Christmas Day officially began. Harry raised his teacup in a silent toast to his parents in all their forms, to Dumbledore and his impossible gifts, to the boy who got to keep his innocence, and to himself for finding the courage to choose compassion over comfort. Merry Christmas, he whispered to the quiet flat, to the falling snow, to the life he had chosen and the man he had become. Padfoot purred in response, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang out across London, celebrating the birth of hope in the darkest part of winter. Harry Potter settled deeper into his chair, opened his book, and continued living the imperfect, beautiful, genuinely real life he had chosen. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Sleep Wizards Library for this journey through the Christmas they never had. If you enjoyed this story, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to our channel for more magical tales to help you drift off to sleep. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, what you thought of Harry's impossible choice, and whether you would have made the same decision. As you settle into sleep tonight, let Harry's story remind you that the life you have, imperfect as it may be, is yours. That the family you choose can be just as real as the family you're born into. And that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept our scars and build something beautiful anyway. Sweet dreams, dear listeners. May you find peace in your choices, comfort in your connections, and rest in the knowledge that surviving and living are both forms of magic worth celebrating. Good night from the Sleep Wizards Library. Sleep well and dream of the life you're building. One imperfect, beautiful choice at a time.